So look, the information I'm about to read, the sources, because I don't want to like read every source after, but this comes from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, Prison Policy Initiative, the National Conference of State Legislatures, the Congressional Research Service, the CDC, the Defense Logistics Agency, and the Cato Institute. So there you go. So drug offenses are the leading cause of arrests in the United States, right? So I'm sure you knew that. So there are 1,155,610 arrests in the U.S. for drug law violations in 2020. 150,229 for sales, but, okay, 1,001,913 for possession. Okay, so that means that the majority of people obviously going to prison are going in there for possession. A lot of the time, these could be people who are addicts. These could be people who were in bad situations, who are in and out of prison. Obviously, well, let me not go off on a tangent. Let me read these and then I'll go down. Blacks make up 24% of those arrested, even though it's just 13% of the population. 80% of people in federal prison and almost 60% of those in state prison are either Black or Latino, right? So in terms of marijuana arrests, out of that 1,155,610, 350,149 were for marijuana arrests, 90% for possession. So that's why it's a big deal that Joe Biden recently did what he did, moving the needle forward. Obviously, Joe Biden is a half-measure person, but moving the needle forward is a big deal because, again, 90% of the people who were arrested for marijuana possession or for marijuana were arrested for possession, not for selling it in large quantities or anything like that. They just had it. All right. And then we look at heroin and cocaine arrests. 82% of those were for possession and not for selling. So again, this is bigger than just for cannabis use. People are getting thrown in jail just for using drugs, just for having them. These aren't necessarily like big kingpins that are making millions of dollars in the neighborhood. They're just using them. So we got 2.3 million people incarcerated, 1 in 5 for drug offenses. Less than 1% of prisoners in jails in the U.S. offer what's called methadone or buprenorphine, some shit, I don't know, but buprenorphine or something. Forgive me. I got a lot of shit written down. But those are the two substances that are very effective in treating addiction issues. And so we're throwing people in jail, and then we're not even giving them treatment that can help them get off the substances that they're addicted to. So it's just a revolving door that never closes, right? We're punishing them, and we're not helping them whatsoever. All right, so we got 157,000 people in local jails for drug offenses, nearly 25% of the total jail population. 191,000 in state prison for drug offenses. That's 15% of the total state prison population. 100,000 people in federal prisons and jails for drug offenses. That's nearly 45% of the total population. 2,100 kids in youth facilities for drug offenses. Okay. And then these are even bigger statistics because it's not just people that are in prison, it's people who are on parole and probation as well. So we got 238,183 people on parole for drug violations and 510,937 on probation for drug violations. So that's basically people who are living under surveillance, right? For, I don't know, smoking weed, doing some coke, who knows? You know what I'm saying? But again, this costs a lot of money, which I'm going to get into. This costs a lot of money and ain't nobody slowing down their drug usage. Every 90 seconds, someone is arrested for a marijuana offense. 150,000 people have been killed in Mexico since 2007 because of drug trafficking. 73,000 people are missing or disappeared in Mexico since 2007 because of drug trafficking. 107,600 incidents of accidental overdoses happened last year in 2021, right? And from 1999 to 2021, the instances of drug overdoses have gone up significantly. Now, obviously, we saw a huge spike in 2020, people having to be in the house, a lot of people losing their jobs, their livelihoods, that absolutely contributed to it. But even before 2020, we were seeing the number of drug overdoses going up. So, it's not like this is a new phenomenon that over the last few years, we saw those numbers jump. No. In 1999, we got 16,849. And every year you go up, where am I at now? 2004, that's 27,424. Let's go up to 2016. What we got? 63,632. So again, this is a societal issue. This is a mental health issue. This is I can't make ends meet. I have all this debt. I got to pay for my kids. I don't want my kids to have a bad life. People need advice. You know what I mean? So again, despite us making society more punitive, despite us spending, and I'm going to tell you how much money we spent in a second, more overdose deaths happen every year. People continue to use it. And like I mentioned before, I spent much of I'm 30 years old, so I'm still a young adult, but I spent much of my 20s selling drugs. And because drugs are illegal and unregulated, they're incredibly easy to get. Incredibly easy. I mean, you got to think, like your over-the-counter prescriptions. Any old body can't just get over-the-counter prescriptions, but any old body can go get them some cocaine or some heroin because it's unregulated. You see what I'm saying? So the conservative concern about, well, we don't want people doing drugs, it's just not being met with reality. It just isn't. It's just not. And we've known this for quite some time. So let's go over a little bit more statistics. Now we're going to talk about how much money we are spending on this drug war, despite the fact that I said this is not stopping nothing because of the counterculture that inevitably comes from telling people what they can't do. Okay. So in 2021, $3.5 billion was spent by taxpayers to fund the DEA. Okay. And $47 billion is spent every single year enforcing drug prohibition. We got a few more stats, and I'm going to close it out with just some final thoughts. Okay. Since 1971, America has spent over $1 trillion enforcing our current drug policies. The number of illicit drug users rose to 13% of Americans 12 years or older in 2019. And honestly, those numbers are probably a bit higher. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're a lot higher, but maybe a couple of percentage points higher because a lot of people aren't going to openly admit that they do cocaine. You know what I'm saying? Maybe to help them when they're working on something or, there's a lot of people who aren't going to openly admit that. So I would expect that to be maybe a couple of percentage points higher. It costs $37,500 annually to house federal inmates, right? And I just went over the numbers of how many people we got in prison just for having drugs, not for selling them, just for having them, right? It costs $37,000. I mean, that's a lot. That's more money than I spend on rent a year. That's a considerable amount of money. I mean, obviously, it costs more money than that total, on like entertainment and food. But that's a considerable amount of money just for someone to be in jail because they was getting high or something. You know what I mean? So $182 billion is spent annually on mass incarceration. That's a lot of money, so come on. Americans spent $150 billion in 2016 on cannabis, cocaine, heroin, and meth combined. That's the stat from the RAND Corporation. $150 billion in 2016 on 4 drugs combined. And then in 2017, $158 billion was spent on alcohol.